The video you're about to see is exclusive training content from my online training platform that is designed to help Medicare agents specifically grow their business faster and more effectively and efficiently, called Six Figure Medicare University. Six Figure Medicare University, at the time of recording this content, is north of 180 online training videos where we go over Medicare basics for newbies, product knowledge, Medicare 101s, but it also gets more and more advanced the farther you go, with marketing content, Facebook ads, seminars, branding, content creation, automation, and so much more. If you enjoy this free exclusive training we're giving out publicly and you want to access more training just like it, Six Figure Medicare University is a one-time investment of $2,500. Because you watch this video here today, we're going to give you 50% off on that price. A link to it will be found down in the description of this video if you so choose to partake. We do weekly training calls all year round on Thursdays where live trainings on various high-level subjects just like this are done. The recordings are, of course, uploaded into Six Figure Medicare University in case somebody isn't able to make the live. And if you choose to join, you will be invited weekly to those live training calls in addition to having lifetime access to the library of content. We do not do these training calls during AEP, but you have lifetime access at your demand and at your convenience to Six Figure Medicare University when you join the platform. Hope you enjoyed this training, and if you did, do me a favor and drop a like at the end of the video. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good week. And hope everybody's starting to feel the burn with AEP approaching. I mean, I guess I shouldn't hope you're feeling the burn, but if you're not feeling the burn, might mean there's not enough going on. So that's maybe why I hope that you're feeling the burn a little bit. Hope everybody's doing well. I am back in the office today. I have been out for about a week. So it's good to be back in the office. It's good to be back with you guys. Last week's training was the last time I was actually here in the office. So there's that. First off, before I kind of get started, can everybody hear me okay? My Zoom audio has been hit or miss the last couple of meetings that I've done. Want to make sure that everybody can hear me. If you guys could give me like a yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, Beth. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Shan. Thank you, Jane. Perfect. Awesome. 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 Good. Just wanted to make sure. All right, guys. So today we're going to be talking about something that's a little different. Today we're going to be talking about book of business acquisitions, how to value a book of business, how to kind of determine, what a book of business is worth, and everything else in between. So kind of an exciting topic. It's something that I was going through the university and seeing if we had any videos on this in particular, and we didn't. And I was like, really? That's a shame. So we should probably put one together that kind of discuss this topic in general. Maybe you want to sell your book of business at some point. Maybe you want to acquire somebody else's book of business. This training should help with either of those. I do have a hard stop, by the way, at the top of the hour, but I think that should give us plenty of time to kind of cover this topic in general. So what we are kind of looking at when it comes to book of business acquisitions. Oh, one more thing before I wanted to mention, sorry guys, before we jump in, is a couple weeks back I had mentioned doing a Google My Business training and doing a Facebook ads training for our Facebook ads and what we're going to be running during AEP. I have our Facebook ad webinar put together. There's just a few additional tweaks that I need to do. So that's why we haven't done that training as of yet. Hopefully I'll have it done by next week, and we can do it next Thursday. But we will certainly do it before AEP. So I have not forgotten, and we did do the Google My Business training last week. So if you missed last week's training, that should be uploaded up in Six Figure Medicare University by now. So you just log in and go check that out. So anyway, guys, let's have a conversation about books of businesses and what they're worth. How many of us are familiar with groups like Integrity, AmeriLife, Senior Market Sales? Give me like a thumbs up or like a yes or anything like that if you've heard of all three of those groups. Michelle, no. Okay. Reason I ask is because I don't want to go too much into the weeds of kind of explaining those groups, because they, whether we like it or not, we have to kind of mention them when we're talking about acquisitions, because those three groups do more acquisitions in our industry than probably everybody else put together. They probably do 90% of all the acquisitions. And if you ever have a desire to sell your business, and be, somebody that is being bought out in an acquisition, usually those are the ones that people think of. I'll give you guys a really brief explanation just because, some of you might not be aware of Integrity and AmeriLife and Senior Market Sales. So what these organizations are, they are quite different from each other. So AmeriLife and Senior Market Sales are more similar than Integrity is to them. So I'll start with those. Those two groups have been FMOs for a very, very long period of time. AmeriLife in particular has been in business for decades. And they were kind of like these old school guards of IMOs, FMOs, top of hierarchies, back when there wasn't nearly as many as there are today. And so kind of what these businesses started doing over the years is they started building out multiple facets of their companies, right? So in addition to being humongous FMOs with, in AmeriLife's case, they probably have 100,000 agents, maybe more. I'm not sure how many agents Senior Market Sales has, but they certainly at the very least have tens of thousands of agents. They started buying businesses in the form of acquisitions to kind of diversify their portfolios, have subsidiaries and things along that nature. Integrity is by and large a private equity company. So Integrity, when people think of Integrity, they think of FMO. Really, it's not the case. Integrity itself is not an FMO. Integrity is a company that buys FMOs and different insurance businesses. So Integrity owns Agent Pipeline. Integrity owns Premier. Integrity owns Tidewater Management. Integrity owns CSG Actuarial. Integrity owns DAPT Research. Integrity owns Heartland. Integrity owns, take your pick, in terms of organizations. And so Integrity is a company that's kind of come in and done these acquisitions. Now, when agencies were doing these buyouts, if you were kind of in the business, the last 5 years, you probably remember hearing, which seemed like almost on a weekly basis, a large organization would sell to either AmeriLife or Integrity, with SMS but kind of being like the third horse. There wasn't as many people selling to SMS, but there were certain people that did. A couple groups that are big names that sold to SMS, but most people were selling either to Integrity or to AmeriLife. Now, I'm not just talking about anybody was selling to those organizations. Usually to get them to give you the time of day, you have to have a certain value point of your business that you're selling. So what do I mean by that? Well, first off, your company needs to have a certain amount of revenue. Okay. Integrity started out meaning, basically stating that in order for them to give you a look for an acquisition, you had to have at minimum a $500,000 or more EBITDA. For those of you who are not familiar with EBITDA simply put is a calculation. It's a calculation. It's a math equation of your business's profit minus expenses. And there's a lot of things that can go into your EBITDA. There's a lot of things that can kind of make up that number. So an EBITDA is not your revenue. An EBITDA in some cases is not even necessarily your net income. There are some additional factors that go into your EBITDA. For example, if I spend money on fixing a sign in my office and it's a write-off, technically that subtracts from my gross income to get to my net income, and it's not taxable for me, right? It's a write-off. But with an EBITDA, it's a one-time expense. So because it's a one-time expense, it's not a recurring expense, and I don't need to calculate that towards my losses, right? So if that was $1,000, let's say that $1,000 doesn't need to calculate towards my losses, and then my EBITDA can be $1,000 higher, if that makes sense, because it's not a recurring, ongoing expense with your EBITDA. So the higher your EBITDA, the more valuable your company is, the more profitable your company is. And that's kind of what these businesses were looking for. Now, in order for a group to be considered as well, when it comes to acquisition for an Integrity or an AmeriLife or one of these, monster organizations, and trust me, we will get into smaller book acquisitions. We'll get into what your book is actually worth. We're going to get into all the weeds on this. Okay. So, but I'm getting this part of it out of the way early because it's something that everybody wants to know about. And it's something that is very relevant when we're having this conversation. So with Integrity and AmeriLife, in addition to the value of your business and the profitability of your business, they also have to look at your business as desirable, right? And what do I mean by desirable? Well, is your business just you and maybe your spouse running the whole thing, and you guys are working 80 hours a week? And if you go on vacation, the whole thing goes to shit. But maybe you write a lot of business. Maybe you have, a huge book of business. You might be able to hit the certain EBITDA numbers that an Integrity or AmeriLife wants, but you might not be as attractive. And the reason for that is because your business is looked at as more of a risk, right? It's like, it doesn't have leadership. It doesn't have structure. It doesn't have a foundation of helping it run. It's all on you and your spouse in that hypothetical scenario, right? And so what is the company that's buying you thinking about? Well, what would you think about? What would you think about right off the bat? What I would think about is, what if one of them has a heart attack and they are a vegetable and they can't run the business? What happens? And all the work falls on one person, right? Like they don't have a team, they don't have departments, they don't have these different kind of things. And that's what they're going to kind of be looking at. Like they are attracted to businesses that are going to be well-oiled machine with good structure, with profitability, with systems, and with processes. So to get your company ready for acquisition, if that's ever anything that's a desire of yours, it needs to be profitable, but it also needs to be something where you can literally be plugged out and someone else can be plugged in to run the company for you. Now, the other piece of this puzzle that's very, very important that we discuss is, hang on, guys, let me see if I can close my email down so it doesn't keep jumping on me every couple of minutes here. The other thing that's important to kind of keep in mind when it comes to these acquisitions is usually when someone does an acquisition, and by the way, that $500,000 EBITDA number is what Integrity anyway, that was their bottom line at the beginning when they started doing acquisitions. Now it's closer to $1 million, 1.5. So to get them to buy you and to get them to give you the time of day, it's more difficult. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult because they've bought so many huge businesses now. Integrity is really, by and large, the largest distribution channel that there is in our industry. Integrity has a higher market cap right now than Nike, than Chick-fil-A. Like, Integrity is worth tens of billions of dollars. Went to an Integrity partner event earlier this year, because I am now, as some of you may know, an Integrity partner myself. And I was invited to an Integrity partner event in Dallas. And they shared some interesting statistics and information from the stage, one of which, in 2022, Humana did about 8 million enrollments, Medicare enrollments total, the whole company. Aetna did about 2.5. Integrity did 12 in 2022. So Integrity did more enrollments as a whole, which encompasses their entire organizations that they oversee, than all of Humana and all of Aetna put together, to kind of give you an idea how big they are. So as they grow, their standards for who they want to buy grows with them. And so that's really an important thing to be thinking about. Because obviously, when they're just getting started in kind of growing their portfolio, they're going to start maybe with smaller groups. Now they've bought the agent pipelines of the world, the premiers, the PHPs, the FFLs, these large organizations, whether you like them or not, they're big organizations. And so now they encompass these large organizations. So their standards have raised in who they're willing to buy versus who they're not. Now, usually when someone does an Integrity deal or a deal with like an AmeriLife, from what I have seen, I've known many, many people that have done deals like that. I've been very, very close to deals like that. What I've typically seen is they're not just buying your business or your book of business, or your revenue. They're also buying you when they're buying those kind of situations. So let's say you have a book of business, and let's say your book of business is 10,000 members, hypothetically speaking. What they don't want is they don't want you to just step away. Let's say you have this thriving organization, right? You have departments, you have leadership, you have systems, processes, but you're the leader. You're the head of the snake. They don't want to just buy the business and you walk away. The business is far less valuable without you in it, because then they're buying a business that they have to run themselves, and they don't want to do that. They want you to run it for them. And so usually what they'll do is they'll do agreements with you. And the deals kind of are, there's no exact structure to them, but usually what they'll do is they will have you sign a contract where you will agree to stay on for 3, 4, 5 years at a time. And think of it almost like a pro athlete is signing a contract, right? And they play out the longevity of their contract. And then when their contract ends, you have the option of signing a new contract and staying on more and making more money. Now, what do they do when they buy your business in that scenario? Well, what they were doing in the past historically is they were doing 8, 9, 10, 11, sometimes even 12 multiples on the EBITDA. So what does that mean? If your EBITDA was 500,000, let's say, and they bought you, and they did a 10 times EBITDA, and your EBITDA is 500,000, then your buyout is $5 million. Now, they will typically only do those high multiples if you stay on. They're not just buying your clients. They're not just buying your book. They're not even just buying your business. They're buying your whole operation, which starts with you. They're buying you, the leader, in that circumstance. And that's when they're willing to do those higher EBITDAs. Now, the multiples have gone down quite a bit because interest rates have changed significantly in the past, year and a half or so. So they're not doing those 9, 10, 11, 12 multiples anymore. They're doing closer to 6, 7, 8 multiples. But the right organization maybe could be able to get one of those higher multiples, but they're not being flung around like they were, is what I would say. And so something to think about there. If with that type of acquisition, that's usually the way it works. And then usually they'll break it up in, they'll give you some up front, they'll give you some in stock options, they'll give you some as you go, in time. They usually give you goals in terms of earnouts. So you'll have, let's say they want you to grow by a certain percentage in production year in and year out. And each year you hit it, you get another 20% or 30% of your buyout and your revenue. So all deals are structured a little differently. They are negotiations, but that's usually what you have to do if you want to be acquired in that regard by an Integrity, by an AmeriLife. I don't know the AmeriLife structure nearly as well. Admittedly, that is not my world. And it's the other side of the coin. But I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about that. So that's always what people want to know. How do I sell to integrity? Become a big, massive business, and a business that's got structure, infrastructure, profitability. That a world-class business is how you sell to integrity. It's how you get them to care. Point blank. Now let's talk about just regular books of businesses. Let's say a book of business of 20, 40, 50, 100, 200. What are these books of businesses worth? And what should you pay for them if you're looking to buy one? Or if you wanted to exit, let's say, and sell your book of business. Well, there's usually two different scenarios. Now, one thing to understand is selling a book of business is nowhere near the same type of valuation that an integrity deal and a AmeriLife deal is done. The reason I brought that up and kind of explained that for you guys in such detail is I wanted you to understand the difference. It's not just clients that integrity and AmeriLife are buying. They're buying the business, the systems, the infrastructure, the leadership. They're buying it all. So they're willing to pay a premium for that. Now, when you're selling a clientele, or when you're buying a clientele, you're just buying the clients. And what happens with those clients? Well, there's always some risks when it comes to buying a book of business. One, there's three risks, in my opinion, that are going to be your biggest risk. One, what is the age of the book? If you're buying a book that the age is, and the average age is 82, let's say, that book is going to be dramatically less valuable than an average book that has an average age of 67 or 68, right? Because the clients are going to be on the books longer. That's number one. Number two, when in the year are you buying the book? Are you buying it in January during OEP? Are you buying it right before AEP? Are you buying it in the off season? I would argue as a buyer, the best time to buy is probably in April, right after OEP wraps up. The worst time to buy a book of business is September, because you're going into AEP and you could lose a whole chunk of those clients. Now, why would you lose the chunk of those clients? Well, simply put, they signed up with someone else. They were convinced and sold on the idea of working with whoever's selling you the clients. And so they don't know you. You're a stranger. You essentially are just, being assigned to their account, and they don't know you from a hole in the wall. So what is the danger of that? What can end up potentially happening? Well, what can end up potentially happening is that you can lose some of those clients, and they might not be as sticky. Now, there are some things you can do to prevent that from happening, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, average age of the book, when in the year are you buying it? And three, what is the policy makeup, right? Are they strictly Medicare supplement business? Medicare supplement business is not nearly worth what it was 3 to 5 years ago. I can tell you that. Is it Medicare Advantage business strictly? Is it strictly D-SNP business? Is it a bunch of ACA business? Is it a mixture? Who are the carriers as well? Different carriers have different values in policies. So these are all things you need to be looking at when determining the value of a book. Usually in a normal situation, I would say if it's a book of business that you're actually just trying to buy or sell or whatever the case might be, you're probably looking at 1 times the annual revenue to 2 times, 2 being the highest. And that's if it's prime business, because there is risk that the buyer's taking on, because it's not like an integrity deal where you're staying on and servicing the members for them. It doesn't work that way. They have to do all the work. They're taking on all the service work. And there's a potential risk that the clients might not stay with them. So anything above 2 at its very highest, in my opinion, is a ripoff. and I would not pay any more than that. Now, there's different ways that you can structure deals like that. Now 2 would be if it's like the prime, most desirable clientele. Usually, I'd probably be more closer to 1 to 1.5 in terms of what I would value the business. Like, it would have to be a really, really good situation for me to really value it to. We've bought several small books of businesses to where, we gave them a year of revenue on that book and we fronted it to them. So it was all up front. Now, obviously, when you get into higher books of businesses, when you get into 400, 500, 800, 1,000 members, fronting them is a ton of money. So that's the other thing you got to think about. If you're fronting somebody a bunch of money to buy their book of business, it can get into the 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, if you're fronting them even for a year, right? Like 350 clients is 6 figures of revenue in renewals. So on the Medicare side, I should say, typically. So if someone has 350 clients or more, it's $100,000 if you're fronting them a year. In some cases, that's a lot of money. Like, what could you do with $100,000 in your business? You could do so much with $100,000 in your business. You could open up another office, hire some LOAs, do a ton of marketing. And what it always comes back to me is, would I be better off taking this money and investing it in my business to try to acquire this many clients, or would I be better off buying them? And that is the number one question I think you need to ask yourself when it comes to buying a book of business. I am probably more attractive, admittedly, attracted to buying smaller books, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, because I don't have to front so much capital, right? Like, I'm not a private equity company. Now, sometimes where you can kind of work into it to where it's the best of both worlds is maybe you'd work out a deal where some of it is fronted and some of it is paid over time, right? And so, Jason said seller finance. Yeah, that's certainly always an option of something that you can do. If that's the kind of a route you want to go. Typically, we try to avoid that ourselves just because I don't really want to deal with it. I would rather just dip into my pockets and pay for something. But you can get really into the weeds when you're going into like financing, taking out, loans, things like that. But anyway, I think that what you're kind of looking at when you're doing a deal is sometimes it can be, creative. Sometimes it can be a little creative. I think that, what about buying and selling down? I'll come back to that. That's a good question. That is a really, really good question. So what usually my ideal deal when I'm working with somebody, if it's a smaller book, if it's like 20, 30, 40 clients, then what I'd probably, typically like to do, and as long as it's not a book that is incredibly old, or it's like not a desirable book, then I probably wouldn't do it this way. I might not even be interested in buying it. But I would essentially be willing to front them 1 year's worth and then they're done and nothing more. Now, if it's a bigger book than that, maybe we front some up front, maybe we pay some over time, a percentage of revenue, and maybe we stretch it out. Maybe we stretch it out to 2 to 3 years. Maybe in some situations we stretch it out over 5 years. So there's things you can do to kind of play with it. And sometimes you'll see that happen with succession planning. When somebody is passing their business down to their child, or they're passing their business down to, somebody that they've been grooming to kind of take over their business, they will work out a situation where they pay a percentage over time. Maybe they pay a shrinking revenue. I see this actually more often than you'd think. Maybe they start off paying 50% of the revenue, and they do that for a few years, and then it goes down to 40%. And then after a few years, it goes down to 30%. And then after a few years, it goes down to 30% or 20%, 10%. And then eventually it's gone. It's like maybe a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan or something like that with succession, but there's no upfront money. So there's a lot of ways that you can structure an acquisition or buying deals. And there's really not necessarily a right or wrong way. I always just think about it from the perspective of, is this a good investment? And can I put my money in another place in my business and it be better for me? And if the answer is yes, there is, I probably won't do the deal. That's usually kind of the way that I look at it. And so this is kind of what I would tell you guys that I would kind of look at, right? If you're trying to buy a book of business and let's say half of it's ACA, I would dramatically look at that very closely. Why? Because typically on average, rule of thumb, exceptions don't disprove the rule, but rule of thumb is ACA business is not as sticky as Medicare. I think most of us could probably agree with that in a vacuum. I actually learned through my partnership with Integrity that most players out there that are buying in a big way, they value a Medicare client 4 times more than they value an ACA client. 4 times more. So what would I pay for an ACA clientele? I don't think I'd pay much. I might pay 6 months advance at the best for an ACA clientele. And I might not even do that. It's going to depend on who the carrier is. Like, is it a stable carrier? Has it been one that's been really good in the market for a while? Is it relatively newer? All of these things are going to be things I'm going to be looking at. Now, what type of plan is going to be very, very important as well. I'm much more interested right now in buying Medicare Advantage plan clients than I am buying Medicare supplement clients. Why? Because I believe in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see Medicare supplement start to phase out. With all this new PDP changes, with all this new prescription drug plan coverage changes, I've talked about it before. You guys have probably heard me talk about it. A lot of what's been circulating on the Facebook groups the last couple of days has been the new WellCare pre-looks. And in a lot of markets, WellCare is having PDPs at $0 premiums and 50 cent a month premiums in some markets. But if you look at their tier 3s, their tier 4s, the tier 3s are like 25% coinsurance. So if you have any clients that are on inhalers, they're taking Jardiance, they're taking Xarelto, they're going to get killed. And you're going to see a lot of people, even when the $2,000 cap comes, you're going to see a lot of people that were never paying anywhere close to $2,000 a year and out of pocket for their meds. Now all of a sudden they're hitting it because of these new structures. And from what I've seen on all the Medicare Advantage plans, they're still having your typical $45 copays for tier 3s, $95 copays for tier 4s. I haven't seen really any change there. It's just been on the PDP front. And so, that to me is going to make it really tough to be on a sup. It's just going to make it harder and harder and harder because the drug coverage is going to be so much stronger on a Medicare Advantage plan versus a PDP. I just feel like the writing on that is on the wall. And so for me, I value Medicare Advantage business now more than Medicare Supplement. It didn't used to be that way. Medicare Supplement used to be a more desirable product line because it was no service work. It was very simple. And, Medicare Supplement, and not to say that Medicare Supplement's a bad product line, but the chances of you having to move that client or lose that client in the next 5 years is high, right? And so my highest product type is Medicare Advantage. I'm valuing DSNP not nearly as high. So DSNP clients, why? Because they can change once a quarter. They'll change for a cookie. They're typically not the most desirable clientele, right? So I'm going to value middle income to higher income, middle class to upper middle class clientele that are on Medicare Advantage plans, probably the most of any type of clientele. I'm going to value them at age 67 to 72. Though that's my prime premium desired clientele. If I can do it with a carrier that we have a lot of clients with, that we work a lot with, that is stable, that's not relatively new in the area. Maybe they didn't come in a year or two ago, and they're going to be like this on the benefits. They have a stability in the market. Those are things I'm looking at as well. So if I can buy a United Healthcare clientele, if I can buy a Humana clientele, I'm going to value that way more than a regional carrier. I'm going to value that much more than, a carrier that's more difficult to work with. I won't say any names. So these are things that I think you need to be looking at when it comes to determining the value of a book of business. I think for a Medicare book of business, in most cases, you're probably looking at 1 to 2 times an annual revenue from the commissions, somewhere between there. 1, if the book of business is less desirable, and maybe closer to 2 if it's much more desirable, but it has to be premium for it to get 2. I think in most cases, it's probably going to be more closer to 1.5 or in that ballpark. And so now, and if it's a larger book of business, I'd probably find a way to structure it to where you pay over time, because there's so much you can do with that revenue in your business that can probably grow your business better than buying a large book of business if you're having to front a bunch of money up front, right? So there's some really good questions on here I've seen. So Brandon asked, what about buying and selling downline? Is there a structure to this as well? So that kind of falls more into the integrity AmeriLife conversation yet again. So those businesses are buying the entire companies, right? And so if they buy an FMO, for example, let's say the FMO is 10,000 agents that are contracted with them, they essentially are buying the downlines as well, but the FMO is still there. The person is still working with that FMO. It's just the private equity is the one that's reaping the benefits of the benefits of working with the downline. I've never seen like a small agency buy downline from somebody else. I've never seen that, because the agents will just leave. I've never seen a situation where, like, let's say you're contracted with Billy and Billy sells you to Johnny, and you're like, who the hell's Johnny? Billy's my mentor. Billy's the guy that I wanted to work with. I think the chances of that, the agents just self-releasing or asking for releases, would be humongous. I don't think there's any value in it, unless you're in Integrity or in AmeriLife and you're buying an FMO, and that FMO is staying on, running the business, and the agents still get to work with the same old people they've always gotten to work with, right? That's where it's valuable. But if it's like transferring the downline, like you transfer the clients, I don't think there's any value there, because again, the agents just leave. It's easier for an agent to change their upline than it is for a client to change their policy, in terms of like their business can still run, they can still sell the same policies, they can still do the same products. They're just changing who they're connected to. Now, it's a pain in the ass process, of course, but for a client, it's a little bit more intimidating to change their policy, because it's their healthcare. My idea was to buy agents to push my writing levels. Yeah, I understand what you mean by that. I think it'd be easier to recruit them than it would be to buy them. Because if you buy them, why would they stay with you? Like they have no say in the matter if you're buying them. And I've never even seen a deal like that wasn't like an Integrity or an AmeriLife where they just bought an FMO and they own everything that happens with the FMO. So that's just my 2 cents on it, for what it's worth. But yeah, guys, I would say, I'm going to value, when I'm buying a book of business, regular Medicare Advantage plans first, Medicare Supplement second, DSNP third, ACA last, if I'm buying a health book of business like that. And I'm not going to buy group or anything like that. I have no interest. I don't want that business. And so I'm factoring that into what I'm willing to offer somebody. How many clients? I'm going to factor that into what I'm willing to offer somebody. What's the diversity? Is it 15 different carriers, or is it all one carrier? I'm going to factor that into what I'm willing to offer somebody. What's the average age of the clients? Is the average age 67? Or is the average age 75? Or is the average age 82? I'm going to factor that in to what I'm willing to offer. Who's the carrier? Is it a United Healthcare, or is it a Molina? Nothing against Molina. I don't mean to pick on Molina. They're actually going to be in our office in about 30 minutes. So don't. I will deny. I will deny if you guys repeat that. But it's true. Their business is going to be stickier with certain carriers than others. So all of these things together actually come together in terms of what I'm willing to negotiate and offer for a book of business. There's an integrity company that we've started working with called Depth Research, and there's another one. The name is escaping me. That actually what they do is they specialize in putting together what a book of business is worth based on all of those variables and all those factors that I mentioned. If you're buying a book of business and you're working with a large FMO, they could probably help you come up with a good valuation as well. What I'm giving you is more generalities because there are a lot of variables in terms of what it's going to be worth. There is no exact answer. There's a lot of variables. Not all business is created equal, and not all clients are created equal. So these are things you guys have to be aware of when it comes to actually buying a book of business. Now, if you're selling the book of business, it's one of those things where there's 3 reasons why you'd sell a book of business. 1, you need capital up front. You need it fast. So you need as much upfront money as possible. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people do that before. 2, you want to retire. And you're just, you're older, you want to retire, you want to exit. And 3, you want to try a new career path. Like this business just isn't working for you. You just want to call it quits. You're like, I'm done. Those are the 3 reasons why you'd sell a book of business in my mind. If you're just selling a book of business and you're not trying to do an integrity deal, an AmeriLife deal, that's more of like a legacy thing. That's a humongous, a humongous intake. But if you're in those 3 categories, what you're going to ask for is going to vary. Like if you're doing the first one, you probably want as much upfront money as possible, but someone might not be willing to give you everything upfront. So you might have to take as much as possible and then take some, stretch that over a long period of time. If you are the second person that wants to retire, maybe you work out a legacy plan. Maybe you work out something to where you're getting paid a percentage of the commissions for a period of time. So like, I'll share this with you guys a little bit, might be kind of helpful. I purchased my father's business last year. And so my father's company is Brindle Insurance Group. I bought it from him. And now I control all the clients. I control the business. I control the branding, all that stuff. Our businesses were totally separate. They never had anything to do with each other. We were contractually connected. In the beginning, I was contracted under him. When we outgrew him, he went under us, on his contracts because we qualified for bigger contracts. And then we bought his company out. Our deal was, I won't give you the exact specifics just out of privacy and respect to him, but we gave him a certain amount of money up front, and then we did a percentage over lifetime of the book. And we did that because it was a sweetheart deal because he's my dad. And, we wanted to, we wanted to make sure that he was taken care of. So, it's a shrinking percentage at that, so it's a certain percentage for the first 3 years. It goes down a little bit for the next 2 years. It goes down a little bit for the next 3 after the 3 years. And then eventually gets to a point where it levels out and it stays that way permanently over the lifetime of the book. I wouldn't do a permanent one with anybody unless it was like someone your family member or something like that. With my dad, it was a grateful thing, something I did because I was grateful because I wouldn't be in the business without my dad. And so, I wanted to make sure that he was taken care of. So that's why we did it that way. It's one of those things where if you do a percentage over time, it's going to have a lot of variables. Again, it's going to, maybe it's 2 to 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. I would factor that in and the percentages based on what you need to be profitable. I would avoid getting into these higher percentages, 70, 80%. You don't want to get that high. But if you can get to 40, 50% that is shrinking over time, then that's maybe a bit more ideal, because it's instant cash flow. It's instant, it's instant cash flow. It's instant revenue right away for your business. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much what I have for you today. I just wanted to kind of just get on here and give you guys some look behind the curtain of kind of how this is working right now. Give you guys some insight, kind of what we look at when we're buying a book of business. And again, I hope this was helpful for you guys to kind of see the different scenarios, what the difference is between an integrity deal and, just a smaller book of business sale. I think they're major differences from each other. And I hope you guys were able to kind of see that from this training. Any questions for me on this? Anything you guys want to know? Throw them in the chat, unmute yourself. We got a few more minutes left here, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have on this topic. Cool. Doesn't look like there's any questions. Yeah, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Kind of a different topic. Oh, Michelle, I'm getting ready to buy my dad's business. Let me know if you want to set up a call sometime. I can share a little bit more details of how we did it with my dad's. Again, unique situation, but yeah, let me know if you want to set up a call. I'm happy to privately give you some of those details. Shoot me an email, Michelle. Let's set it up. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being on. We'll throw this recording into Six Figure Medicare University, so it'll be on by the end of the day. And hopefully next week I'll be completely ready with the Facebook ad training, and we'll see if we can do that. So you buy books of 100 to 400. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I mean, if the deal is right, Jason. But I'm not saying, I'm not like jumping up and down for joy to do it. Like my ideal book of business purchase is probably 20 to 100, because I'm not having to pay as much up front, but I'm just gaining these new clients. I have to dip more into the pockets to get higher than that. It's not that I won't do it. I will do it if the deal is right, but it has to be the right deal. It has to be a deal that it's attractive to me, if that makes sense. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Have a good, I'm talking client 100 to 400. Shoot me a message, Jason. I can answer any questions on that. Any follow-up questions on that. All right, guys. Have a good week. Thank you all for being here, and we'll be back next week. Have a good weekend. Later.